Hey guys, welcome to the homecoming speaker event. So glad all of you guys can make it. I'm Mert, I'm the speaker event coordinator, and here with us we have Ben Gallacher. He was an NHL draftee in 2010, and he actually played as a scholar athlete for 4 years in Division I hockey before graduating at the Eisenberg School of Management here at UMass. He also co-founded Voxel AI, which is a company that personalizes medicine and imaging for patients with neurological disorders. So, without further ado, give it up for Ben.
Hey guys, is the sound okay?
Yeah.
Sounds totally fine. Sure. As Mert said, my name's Ben Gallacher. Obviously very honored to be here, really humbled that you guys have asked me to come and speak for homecoming. It really, really means a lot. I know it's Wednesday night. When I was at UMass, Wednesday night meant guitar dudes, so I don't know if I've drastically aged myself right now, or thank you. A little shout out, thank you. But I know that there are many other things you guys could be doing, so I really appreciate you guys taking a bit of time to listen to me tonight. The speech tonight that I'm going to give is around identity, entrepreneurship, and altruism. So these three words to me have been a framework for my life, and I hope that they can provide a little bit of value to yours. So I want to dive in and talk to you a little bit about what you guys are going to hear today. So I'm going to talk to you guys about how things got started for me, what role hockey played in my life, my identity. I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about finding my voice. Most important piece there is that it took me a time to find that voice and to really, kind of come into my own. Lastly, I kind of want to talk about how my path has pivoted and changed. There's been a lot of moments of flux, if you will, and so I want to dig in there. I'm sure you guys have experienced that as well, at different times in your lives, perhaps some of the time at UMass as well. I then want to talk to you guys a little bit about founding my first company. I also want to talk about founding my second company, which Mark didn't bring up. Very important kind of pivot, again, talking about another change that went on for me. All the roadblocks, everything I've run into, I want it to be a very honest conversation. Obviously, I really appreciate you guys coming, so I want to make this as value add for you. Feel free at the end. We're going to go through some questions, have a really long Q&A discussion where you guys can get really honest. I'm going to be very honest back with you guys about my experience. And then lastly, I want to talk about really what my driving force is, and that's altruism. That's giving back, that's serving. Obviously, I've got some provocative words on the screen: time, money, blood. It's something I'm going to dig into later, but it's my views around how I think you can give back. It doesn't always need to be about giving money in a philanthropic sense. So with that, I'm going to start with identity. Now, I'm from Calgary, Alberta, western part of Canada, above Montana for US geographic reference. And from the time that I was about 4 years old, my life revolved around hockey. Okay, so that meant family vacations being geared around my hockey. That meant my school being geared around my hockey. And that also meant leaving home at 15 years old to pursue playing hockey. So in the spirit of talking about my path and how it pivoted and how it changed and what that meant, the whole path from going down and trying to be a professional athlete, and specifically in hockey, is there's a path of being drafted to the NHL, getting a scholarship to the United States, in my case, and then ideally playing professional hockey. That was what it was going to look like for me. So, what happens when that changes? What happens when you don't want to do the major that you're in 2 years in? What happens when you want to quit your job, as we've seen with the pandemic and the great resignation, so to speak? What happens when you have to look at the world through a very uncertain lens? So for me, most people don't know, I started my university career at Ohio State. I didn't start at UMass. So I want to talk about that. I was playing junior hockey. I was drafted in the NHL. I felt like I was on the right path. And the coaching staff that recruited me to Ohio State were fired. And with about 2-3 months to make a decision on whether or not I was going to go there or whether I was going to defer, choose a different school, I leaned very heavily into my network at the time. That looked like my family and my agent. And I trusted my agent very heavily, obviously 17 years old, just drafted, leaning on him for advice on where to go, how to go about it, wanting to make the right decision. Now, what that means for everybody is different, but at the time I didn't understand that. I was trying to make the right decision. Not the right decision for me, but whatever this right decision was. So I decided to go to UMass, or not UMass, sorry, Ohio State, against what was a gut feel in me that maybe I should go somewhere else. And that didn't work out very well for me at the time. My freshman year, I didn't play very much. My school was very difficult. I found a hard time getting my feet underneath me. And ultimately, I ended up leaving Ohio State after my freshman year. I went back, played junior hockey in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and I took time to really gather my thoughts and think about what was going to be next for me. At that point in time, I still cared deeply about hockey. I still wanted to dig in and think about being a professional hockey player. So I knew the next time I made a decision on where I was going to go to school, I wanted that to be my decision. I wanted the accountability to be on me so that if it went well or if it went poorly, I could look back at myself and say, no matter what, I made that decision, and I can live with that. It's hard to put blame on something when you feel like you didn't fully contribute. And I want to make something very clear about my decision to continue to go to Ohio State. That was my decision. That wasn't my agent's decision. Ultimately, I'm the person who flew to Columbus, enrolled, went to practice every day, and dealt with that. So this time around, it made me a lot easier to decide that I wanted to go and play at UMass. Now, I chose UMass for a number of reasons, some of which worked out and some which didn't. My hockey experience here was not amazing. We didn't have an amazing team when I was here. I did have a fantastic school experience while I was here, and it made me who I am today. Now, something happened in my time at UMass that changed my life. Third-year university, we played Michigan State at Michigan State. I was hit from behind, suffered a very bad concussion, okay? And that was something that, looking back on it, was really the catalyst for change for me. Now, I spent about 7 to 10 days in my apartment, just going to the rink to check in, and then heading right back there. I struggled with anxiety. I struggled with mood issues, and most importantly, I wasn't 100% sure being a hockey player was going to be my path anymore. And so what does that mean? When from the time you're 4 years old until you're 22 years old, all you've done and focused on was being a hockey player. And I encourage all of you in those moments of uncertainty to lean into that uncertainty, because that's where most growth has happened. And for me personally, it's so hard to see how a concussion was going to be the catalyst for me to do what I'm doing today. And that really takes me to the next part about what I'm going to be talking about tonight, which is entrepreneurship. Now, as Mert mentioned, I graduated from Eisenberg. I also took the prerequisites to get into medical school, as I thought maybe I wanted to become a doctor. I thought maybe that was something I was interested in, especially after suffering a concussion and wanting to give back to the same way that the doctors who cared for me did. I followed a mentor of mine to the city of Toronto, which is still where I call home today. I have a girlfriend, I have a dog. Things are barely slowing down there. Now, back then, things were a lot less certain than they are today. I showed up and my mentor was a chiropractor, and he was somebody that I leaned on heavily in my rehab process from that concussion. Now, what I did with him was I followed him around. I really had him take me under his wing. And I was a personal trainer to all of the patients that he was seeing. So my job was really to teach people to pick things up, put them down, ideally we see some results. Now, in those moments in between, because I wasn't doing that 8-10 hours a day, I was meeting as many people as I could. I was taking coffees with anyone who would take a coffee with me. And in that time, I was meeting with a lot of doctors because I thought, maybe I want to go to medical school. Maybe this is going to be my path. And one conversation in particular was a catalyst for change. It was a catalyst to start my first business. Although he wasn't my co-founder, he gave me a new way to look at the world. I said to him, I want to be a doctor. I'm interested in going to medical school. Give me the do's and don'ts. Why would I go? Why would I not go? Talk to me open, honestly. And he said, why do you want to be a doctor? And I said, everything I've told you guys tonight. I wanted to give back. I wanted to be involved, and I wanted to have an impact. And he said, okay. Have you thought about starting a company in the medical field? Have you thought about joining a company in the medical field? I kind of gave him a rebuttal saying, I don't see how that's 100% relevant. So can you please elaborate? And he said to me, he said, as a doctor, you're going to see about 30,000 patients in your lifetime. Some of them are going to want to see you. Some of them are not. Some of them are going to be ready to change. Some of them are not. And so you're going to have an impact on a certain subset of that population. Now, it doesn't mean that being a doctor is a bad thing. I think it's a fantastic thing. Doctors are definitely in short supply right now. But what it did was it widened my lens. And that's really one other thing I want to leave with you guys. I want you guys to understand that when you're initially looking at a problem, think about it through a wider lens. Do you have all the answers? Is it A and B, or is there C? Is there something you haven't talked about? Something you haven't thought through? And I want you to go back to your networks and think about asking people from disparate fields their advice about how they would solve it. Different ways to think about it. This is something that happened when I met my co-founder. The co-founder of my first business is Dr. DJ Cook. He's a neurosurgeon, neuroscientist based out of Queen's University. I initially met him because he runs a traumatic brain injury and stroke lab. I thought about maybe doing my master's underneath him. I thought about maybe doing a PhD underneath him. I wasn't sure if I could get in. And he and I spent a lot of time talking about it, a lot of time talking about the solutions around concussion in today's day and age. Now, you heard Mert talk about Voxel AI. This is the first iteration of Voxel AI. So I mentioned the networking I was doing initially in Toronto. Those are the people that I initially raised money from to help get performance phenomics off the ground. Friends, family, and my network that I was building very slowly. The model that DJ and I took when getting performance phenomics off the ground was that concussion was broken in sports. And the best way to scale academia was to commercialize it. So we spun that business out of his lab. We were focused solely on neurologic imaging, focused around concussion. And this is what we were going out to tackle. Our team was full of PhDs, masters, and obviously DJ with a neurosurgical and neuroscience background. We were very technical. We had one problem. No one wanted to pay us for the product. We had contracts with the military for research. We had professional sports teams in trial. We had GMs and ownership meetings. I mean, the amount of doors that got opened was amazing, even to myself, as somebody who's always knocking down doors and trying to open up doors. However, we couldn't find a way to transact. So as we had raised money, obviously we were spending that money, and we realized that we were going to need to pivot. We were going to need to come up with a new North Star. We needed a new identity as a company. So what did we do? We leaned in to our team. We leaned into the fact that we had neurosurgeons on our team. We had PhDs. We had people that understood the brain. And we went after a medical device classification, specifically going after stroke prognostics and concussion diagnostics. And that's where Voxel AI was born. Now, you know, Mert introduced me, and I think everyone coming here tonight understands that, you know, being an entrepreneur sounds amazing. It's a very interesting way to leave school and start a business. We have really struggled in our own time as a company, and I want to talk a little bit about that. I want to talk to you guys about what that's been like. I brought in a CEO to replace me because I had never sold to a healthcare business before. I'd never taken a company through medical device certifications, FDA approvals, Health Canada approvals. I didn't know what that looked like, and I didn't want to let our team down. And I knew that the investors weren't going to get behind a medical device company with somebody like myself running it. So I searched out a gentleman by the name of Peter Robertson. He now runs Voxel AI, still involved, still on the board. And his background was with GE Healthcare. He used to run the Canadian arm of GE Healthcare. So he had done this before. And as we were gearing up to get ready to fundraise again, we started to see some good investor sentiment. We were starting to feel excited. And March 2020 hit, COVID-19. We had our financing pulled from us. We had the banks texting me, asking if money was going to come in. We had employees asking if payroll was going to get hit that month. And we were scrambling. We found debt financing. The government paychecks did hit our account late, but they did. And we successfully closed the raise close to 6 months after that. It was a very, very tumultuous time. Now that comes back to my first point about leaning into that uncertainty. Because this is a living, breathing company now. We've got stroke trials set up at 4 universities. Things are going very well. However, it was very hard to see putting my next foot forward in March 2020, not knowing where the world was going to go as a healthcare business, needing people to come in and get scanned with COVID-19. This helped me realize where my strengths lie. My strengths lie in knocking down doors, networking, opening up connections, finding people. And that's what led me to start my second business. With 2 of my investors from Voxel AI and Performance Phenomics, both of them carried on in both rounds, to start Blue Deer Capital Partners. This business is focused on helping early stage entrepreneurs, people like me at Voxel, people who are getting off the ground, don't know where to turn, don't understand the government financing, don't understand where to go to look for venture capital financing. This is what we do at Blue Deer. Now, I know that it's one of those things where it may be hard to understand how, or maybe easier to understand after hearing me speak, how the concussion in third-year university is correlated with what I'm doing now, focused on early-stage startups, specifically in the medical device area, specifically in healthcare. However, when I suffered my concussion, I can tell you right now, I had no idea where this was going to lead me. And that's why I want you guys to think about leaning into any uncertainty that you may be feeling. Now, this takes me to part 3 of what I want to talk to you guys tonight. And that's altruism. There's a difference between altruism and philanthropy. Altruism is giving back in the most general term. It's volunteering. It's not just philanthropic donations. It's not just a tax receipt, as an example. Now, I want to tell you a story about how I got into this. I went to a Tony Robbins event a few years ago. You guys don't know who Tony Robbins is. He's like the most high-energy human being ever. He's like a motivational speaker. Very interesting guy. I took one thing away from the weekend that I spent there. And he said, living is giving. Living is giving. And what that hit with me was that even in your darkest times, it draws perspective that things are going to be okay. You're giving back to a greater good. And so some people ask me, how do I do that? I don't have money to donate. How do I get back involved? And this is bringing me back to these 3 provocative words I kind of kicked off with around time, money, and blood. I'm going to start in reverse order. Donating your blood is a very low bar. You can head to the University Health Center, donate your blood. I understand that not everyone is able to donate their blood. I understand that some people are scared of needles. I'm not sitting here promoting donating your blood. That's not what I'm getting at. What I'm getting at is there are other ways to give back. There are ways to get creative and be passionate about something and get involved in that something that strikes a chord with you. And that's where I'll talk about the second piece, which is donating money. Because it's not just donating money for me. I'm involved with the Sick Kids Hospital in Toronto. And we set up a fund, venture philanthropic fund, where we're focused on funding lab stage technology. Early stage stuff, where researchers are just focused on solving really big problems, but they're behind a bench. They're behind a lab bench, and there's no venture capitalist who's going to finance it at that point in time. So not only am I donating a little bit of my money, I'm donating my time, and it's something that I deeply care about. It's what we did with Performance Phenomics. It's what we've done with Voxel, spinning something out of the lab, getting it to a point where the greater population can actually reap the benefits of the impact that can be scaled. Lastly, you can find your time to donate. For me, I love to give back to UMass. Obviously, I'm very grateful to be speaking to you guys. I also sit on the University of Massachusetts Foundation board, and that's a way that I like to give back, try and bring a younger voice, and try and make this university a really fantastic place for all of you guys to attend. Now, I want to leave you guys with 3 points to take home, 3 things to think about, okay? Number 1, you guys have heard me say it a number of times tonight, your path is going to change, okay? There's a quote up here from my favorite author, from my favorite book, The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. The obstacle in the path becomes the path. Never forget, within every obstacle is an opportunity to improve our condition. That's what I mean by taking a step forward into that darkness when things are uncertain. Make sure you're moving forward. The second thing I want you guys to think about, and this is advice that my mother gave me when I was first getting into business, which is your net worth is your network. And that's something that really hit home for me. I've got a quote up here from Keith Ferrazzi. He wrote a book called Never Eat Alone. And he says, the currency is not greed, it's generosity. And so what does that mean? I think this is a really important point to touch on. A lot of people who are meeting with mentors or other people where they're trying to get a job and you're in university, how do I provide value to the other person? I think that's a question that some people come up with. I know that's something that I've asked is, how do I provide value to somebody that I feel like I can only take from? And I think it can be as simple as following up with them, letting them know how much it meant to you that they spent 15 minutes with you. You don't know where that's going to lead down the road. You don't know if that's going to be a job offer or a business opportunity or somebody that you can eventually call a colleague at some point in time. And so thinking about that and cultivating that as a mindset is something that I really want you guys to take away. And lastly, find your driving force. As I mentioned, mine is altruism. Mine is giving back. That's what gets me out of bed in the morning. That's what gives me the fire to speak to you guys tonight about. And I don't know how to find it for you. I can just tell you that for me, what it was for me is having skin in the game. That's why the work that I do at Sick Kids is involved with what my day-to-day job is. That's why I got involved. I had an outstanding experience at UMass. I feel like it's part of the reason I am who I am today. That's why I want to give back to the university. You know? And so think about those moments in your life. Think about those meaningful times. People who have influenced you, where they came from, who they worked for. What are those causes? And the last quote is by Winston Churchill. And it's, we make a living by what we get, and we make a life by what we give. Thank you guys very much. This is my dog, Doug. He's a little black lab. He's just fabulous. I think that's him watching tonight. Guys, I put my email up on the screen. I really mean it. Please reach out. If you guys have any questions, you guys want to talk, you want to bounce ideas off of me, you want it to be a little, more personal, there are things you want to think about and come back to me with, that's my email. And my Zoom link is always open. I am in Toronto, so in-person meetings are a little tough on campus. But thank you guys again for all your time tonight. Happy to answer any questions if anyone has any. I'm happy to dive into anything I talked about in a deeper fashion. Also, happy to talk about fantasy football on Sunday.
What was your favorite dining hall at UMass?
Favorite dining hall? Oh my gosh. Can I say Amherst Coffee?
Yeah.
Is that like a thing?
It's still thing,
Yeah. It's going to be there. It's not a dining hall, I know, but that's like for sure. It's like that's my watering hole. Anyone else? Yeah, go ahead.
What was like the one thing you could say you took away from like UMass?
I don't know if there's just one thing I took away from UMass, but I can give you a couple of things that I took away from UMass. One, and it's not necessarily directly correlated with the university, but one of the things I loved most about my time at UMass was actually Massachusetts. I found the people in Massachusetts, and it, like, I flew into Boston today, and I just feel like totally at home. And I try to bring that same camaraderie, that same home-like feeling to all the rooms that I'm in. And I think that that's something I took away from spending time here. that I think is very, very transferable, and it's very rare. I've lived in 7 cities, and I never felt it, especially in the States. I never felt it quite like I did in Massachusetts. And there's just a level of camaraderie that I try to bring that I think I really picked up during my time at UMass. I think another thing about my time here was that, you know, you're in a really special place. Like, you're not in Boston, you know, you're in Western Mass, and you're surrounded by all of these other universities. So you're surrounded by all of these interesting people, professors who have decided to move to the area. You're surrounded by people who are going to UMass, people who are going to Mount Holyoke, Smith, you know, like, there are so many people in this area, so many young people who are aspiring, that I think that it's contagious, you know, and I think that was one of the things I loved about UMass, is that you can be in a room with students, professors, you know, athletes, engineers, and it's just this kind of melting pot for ideation. So yeah, I don't know if that directly answers it, but those are the kind of things that come to mind. Go ahead.
I have a question from Madeline on Instagram. She asked, for those that may not already have a network, what are a few tips to grow it?
Okay. I'm a big fan of LinkedIn. I told Lindsay I don't have social media, but I do have LinkedIn, and I'm going to elaborate here. So there's a really important point. It's not this blasting a cold email to people or blasting like a cold DM. I think there are ways to be really contextual and creative. I think that the more specific you can be about your ask to a certain individual, and the lower the bar is, the higher the hit ratio is going to be. So as an example, you want to reach out to somebody who works in venture capital, and you want to reach out to somebody who works in venture capital in a very tech-focused area, and maybe you're in the engineering program. So I would go and research the VC firms, see what funding they've done, which companies they've recently financed, do a little bit of digging, put that into your DM in some way so that they know that you've been really thoughtful about why you're talking to them, why you're interested in them. And then I would kind of go a little bit of like a blanket approach, where you can go to the analyst who might meet with you, who might be a couple of years out of school, who might have a different perspective. You can go to one level up where it's a principal, and then you can go right to the managing director or one of the founders of the firm and see who hits. Because that message is also going to be applicable at different levels. And so that's like one strategy I would say that is really helpful, or it's worked for me.
Speaking as a comp sci major, what were some of the difficulties you faced when building Voxel AI?
Yeah.
When trying to propagate it?
Yeah, great question. So so working with MRI data is extremely difficult. I know that you're a comp sci guy, so we can talk a little bit more in depth. We use 5 different pulse sequences to look at the images. And so one of the things that we've run into is that we do all of our work on 3 Tesla scanners right now. And the majority of scanners, I would say, of the world are 1.5 Tesla. And so working down into that range was really difficult. I think that one of the things that you should ask yourself when you're starting a business or thinking about starting a business is this a product or is this a feature? Like, would you be better inside of another company, or are you 100% your own standalone business? And I think had we spent a little more time on that, I still think we'd be I still think we would have gone forward and started Voxel, but it would have helped hone in our thinking sooner. Like, we would have gone after different markets right away, rather than kind of this blanket approach. And I also think that, like, you know, medical devices are difficult for a number of reasons, one of which is that you have technological risk. You also have business model risk. And those are things that I didn't necessarily appreciate at the very beginning, because not only do you need to make sure the tech works, you need to make sure that you price it correctly and that people can actually adopt that. I hope that answered your question.
Perfect.
One more thing about the networking piece. just to come back to that briefly, is when you've had a really successful meeting, ask them if they have any more introductions that they'd like to, that they could make on your behalf. Because a warm introduction, pretty much 100% of the time, moves forward. Whether that's a Zoom call, whether that's, a coffee in person, whatever the case is. And I think that right now, in this environment where the majority of things are done via Zoom, you're going to have a much higher hit ratio, where you're asking people for a 5-minute Zoom, a 10-minute Zoom. And I would just say come very, very prepared to those meetings. Have a very specific reason that you want to talk with them, not just this kind of esoteric, brainstorming idea session. So those would be some pieces of advice.
You said that the time you took between Ohio State and UMass was beneficial to you in your growth.
Yeah.
But if you could go back and go to UMass from the start instead of ever going to Ohio State, would you do that, or would you stick with how things actually played out?
Yeah, I mean, listen, great question. I think hindsight's obviously 2020. That year was really beneficial for me. Extremely difficult year. I had to take 2 degrees in 1 year. I had an associate's degree that I had to get done in order to do what's called a 424 transfer. So that was extremely difficult. I had to get help from my parents, from friends, like with school assignments. It was totally crazy, as well as playing hockey. I missed games. I missed practices. Like, it was a lot just to stay eligible. So I think in an ideal world, yeah, I would have had a fit, gone there for 4 years, and then carried on. That being said, the reason I think it's most beneficial is not just that, it's hard to say it's beneficial that I came to UMass and then got a concussion, but the initial piece I would say is that I was so solely focused on hockey at Ohio State that I think my school suffered because of that. And I don't know that 4 years in a row with that mindset, I would be where I am today. So I had that time to mature, to reflect, and so those are some of the nuances that I feel like it was really, really beneficial. So yeah.
Another question from Instagram. JM Deagle asks, you recommend leaning into uncertainty. Who do you look to for advice when you're in those situations, and how do you weigh advice from others to that of your own instincts?
Great question, George. I would say there are a few people I should say that I take advice from. I have a group of friends. George's part of that. Four guys, and we bounce a lot of ideas off of one another. And it's a very trusted group. We're very, very vulnerable with one another about some of the trials and tribulations, some of the things we're thinking about. As an example, I ran this entire speech by George on the drive here. The whole thing. Gave it to him, top to toe. And I wanted his opinion. I wanted to provide as much value as I possibly could to you guys. That really means something to me, that I can go to my friend and get honest feedback. I would also say that I have a colleague, and he's been a mentor of mine. He helped me raise the money initially for Performance Phenomics. He's my business partner now at Blue Deer. His name's Brad White. And he is somebody that I go to when I really need advice. I would say when I think about the advice portion of it and how it relates to trusting my gut, I would say I only really reach out when I'm feeling a high level of uncertainty. Otherwise, I do my best to make decisions very quickly and reverse those decisions if they're not working. There's a framework for thinking of that. Jeff Bezos actually uses it. I heard it in the podcast and I loved it, which is he asks himself 2 questions. Is this reversible and is it paramount? And if it's reversible, he makes the decision very, very fast. If it's not reversible and it's paramount, he takes a very, very long time to make that decision. And I think that that's a really nice way to think about it.
I know you said that, I think for Voxel you guys are involved in 4 universities.
Yeah.
Are you guys trying to be more involved in universities as you move forward?
Yeah, so we've got stroke clinical studies going on at those four universities. They happen to be universities that have research centers. So we're at Dalhousie University, we're at, this is in Halifax in Canada, Ottawa University, Kingston University, and then Sunnybrook Hospital would be a non-university I guess, research partner of University of Toronto. We're not trying to be a part of more universities. We're trying to spread the risk of our clinical studies so that if one partner can't recruit, we have other partners that are recruiting stroke patients in to ensure that we get enough data. That way we can prove our outcomes and then ideally go out and raise some money on that. So that's, I think, why we've gone with that disparate approach rather than the singular approach. Yes?
So I'm also like pre-med right now, but
Yeah.
I'm doing it for a similar reason that I just want to like keep my options open.
Yeah.
I'm not committed to anything. So thinking about like how you did pre-med because you're considering medical school, looking back, is it something where like if you could go back, would you go to medical school now that like you know what you've done, or like are you still interested in that, or just like what are your opinions on that?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. I think there's always a part of me that thinks that like, an MD does a number of things. First and foremost, you get credentials, right? Like you have a medical degree, and that no one can ever take that away from you. That's something that my grandmother told my mom told me. No one can ever take away your education. So I think that's one way to think about it. I do have a little bit of an opinion around it in the sense that if you don't think you're going to be a doctor, you are taking the spot of somebody who does want to be a doctor. I do think about that side of things. But as far as it relates to like my career, my business, like how I've kind of stayed involved, I don't think a medical degree would help like necessarily doing what I'm doing today, because it's obviously an extremely long amount of time. So I don't know after 8, 12 years that I would necessarily want to move backwards. However, I think it's an easier decision to move backwards from medical school into working in early stage venture and private equity, whatever the case is, healthcare investing, or working for a company, than it is to go from my position to then going back to medical school. So those would be, I know I didn't like directly kind of give you an answer, but I wanted to, kind of at least show you how I thought about it. And those are things that still percolate in my mind. Yeah.
Another question from Instagram. Susan asks, how much of your success to date do you attribute to being a student athlete?
Oh, great question. I think a lot of what I learned being a student athlete was around time management and juggling multiple things at multiple times. And there's a certain level of what I still do today that is very stressful. And I think that being a student athlete helped me cope with the stress and learn how to handle the stress. Another thing being a student athlete did was it instilled, a level of physical activity in you that is directly correlated with your mental health. I still to this day say I work out for my mental health. I don't work out for my physical health. That's a me thing. That's my personal way of thinking about it. And I think that I think quite a bit of how things have kind of transpired is because of my time at UMass, and especially as a student athlete. It also gives you something to be relatable to. So you can talk a lot about, like, if I sit down with anyone who ever played hockey, I could at least talk a little bit about that. And I think that there's a relatability to that, especially in small talk or conversations when you're getting to know somebody. I think it obviously played a really big portion.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So Ben, you're involved with a number of professional boards and volunteer opportunities, and to some of our, to students who are looking ahead and thinking, oh, that sounds interesting to me.
Mm-hmm.
Could you share a little bit more about your experience and how did you select where you want to spend your time, and how did you get involved with some of those opportunities, and maybe what benefits you're seeing as you grow professionally and affiliating with those folks?
Yeah, I used a lot. It's a fantastic question. I used a lot of it as networking. Like, I'll give Sick Kids as a brief example, and I don't know if Boston or any of like the local places that you guys might move to or go back to have this, but these are the types of things that I would look for. Sick Kids has a group called the Innovators Group, and it's kind of 25 to 40-year-old professionals. And so I joined that, like, literally to meet people. I didn't join it to like, be involved with Sick Kids at the time. I'm originally from Calgary, so it wasn't necessarily something that hit home with me. But I knew that 25 to 40-year-olds who were there were going to have some sort of care level for philanthropy. They were going to have some level of interest in healthcare, and they were likely, at some point, potentially looking at donating. So therefore, I knew that they were likely aspirational in their careers. And so I met a lot of actually good friends out of those programs. So that was one way I thought about it, was from like the pure networking angle. The second thing was, I would say I seeked out UMass to be involved. I'm a Canadian. I don't live around the corner, and it's not necessarily as easy as 1, 2, 3 to get here, especially during COVID. However, it had such a profound impact on me. I knew it, and I felt it, and so I wanted to use that to get back involved and give back. And so those are things where I think everyone deep down has a few things that have hit home with them. I think that it's why children's hospitals have such large donations. People's kids get sick there and they go there. People have their kids there. So there's an emotional tie to that. And so I was just trying to think a little bit more organically, like where are my emotional ties today? And then how can I go back and get involved? And, just to tell a funny story about like the UMass Foundation Board, like I was back here, I guess 3 or 4 years ago, and I had a few too many glasses of wine, and I was telling a woman at a hockey event that I thought I would be a good board member on the foundation board. And I don't know, it's the wine talking, but she actually happened to be on the board. And it just happened to, like, it was just random. And she's like, oh, well, let me put your name up as a younger member, as a way to get, younger people engaged and, get a different viewpoint. And they happened to accept me to join the board. So that was something that I did. But to back up a little bit, I also went back and seeked out further education on board training. There's a University of Toronto does a board course that I got expensed through work, so that was how I kind of did that. It was very expensive, but I got expensed through work. But that was something, so I tried to get credentialed to the point around kind of medical school. That's something that it gives you, is those credentials. So if you see me on LinkedIn, I have an ICD by my name, and that's what that is. That's actually what that stands for. So yeah, those are just some of the ways that I thought about getting back involved.
As being from Calgary, and obviously, I mean, right now in recent years with Cale Makar being a very hockey-centric city, was there a lot of support for you, like being an NHL draftee, and just being, I mean, I'd say that's very successful as being a hockey player. Did you have a lot of support from kind of like hometown family and friends, and how did that support you in making your change into being an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I left home at a very young age, so I will say that. At 15 years old, to leave home, it does separate you a little bit from your high school friends, I would say. So that was equally difficult, although, coming back in the summertime, it was exciting to talk to them about what was happening. Although I have to admit, I felt a little bit disconnected at times. I would say from a support level, yeah, it was mainly family, I would say, and then my teammates that I met. So my circle started to kind of trim itself more organically. I think that Calgary is a very hockey-centric town, so obviously people love, the sport and these sorts of things. I will say that there were difficulties associated with that as well, especially stepping away from the game and coming back and meeting people for the first time, and then having to say, oh, you're still playing hockey, and having to kind of explain yourself. So I would say it's a little bit of a double-edged sword, for sure. But yeah, I mean, there's obviously a great support system. Most of my family's still out west, so yeah. I don't know how many of you guys are interested in like the early stage kind of like startup landscape at all. Is that of interest at all to you guys? Is that kind of, yes, kind of, yeah. I would say that like, I don't know if you guys have like a venture capital or like early stage club at UMass or group at UMass. I would definitely think about getting involved there. I would also think about, there's a group in Canada called the Creative Destruction Lab, and they hire kind of earlier stage people focused on being kind of venture managers. That would be like, a Y Combinator or Techstars kind of equivalent, kind of, it's different, but like kind of. I also think that's a great way to learn about the ecosystem, meet other young people who are also focused on and interested in getting involved in that space. Boston, I'm sure, has other like, early stage kind of places to go. It's like the melting pot for biotech and all things technology with Harvard and MIT and BU and BC and Northeastern, obviously UMass in the area. So I think there's just a lot that you can look to get involved with. At least to figure out, you know, it's almost just as valuable to go and realize, like, I want nothing to do with this, you know what I mean? Because then it's like it can steer you a different direction, which is sometimes more valuable. So yeah. Any other questions? I got all the time in the world. Nowhere to go. Yeah, go ahead.
Something that perhaps you wish you had been able to take advantage of at UMass. I mean, it's such a wide campus with so many resources.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to admit, like, I'm a bit envious. Like when I meet a few people in here who are in the engineering program. I got into. I'm like not an engineer's mind at all. I'm like not very good at math. But I think, you know, that's one of those hindsight 2020s. Is I think knowing now what engineers' role is in the world, I think I would have been a little bit more interested, because engineering felt very esoteric to me at the time. So I think might have shifted my major a little bit. And then from a campus life perspective, I think hockey, you know, every Friday and Saturday night you're playing or you're traveling and these sorts of things. And, you know, to Susan's question, it's like there's a lot of time management then to get up the curve on all of your work in school. So I feel like I missed out a little bit on like the actual school experience of like just being in the dorm rooms and being, a part of like proper campus life. I came in as a transfer. Remember, I came in from Ohio State, so I didn't get that freshman experience, meet other freshmen. So I kind of came right into a very small, tight-knit community with the hockey program, which was fantastic. Loved it. Just that would be some of the stuff I think that I didn't necessarily take advantage of with UMass. So hand up over here.
Yeah, I know you said you're pre-med, but
Yeah.
Did you experience like any internships or, you know, because you're in Eisenberg?
Yeah.
Did you experience any of that, you know, whether you didn't, you know, you found out you didn't like this or you liked something, like maybe an internship that inspired you to get into venture capital?
No, it's really interesting. That's a great question. I would say that my focus for a lot of the time was hockey. So I spent, you know, a lot of summers training for that stuff. I think that was a mistake. I really think that was a mistake, because those internships were an opportunity to meet other people, grow your network more organically, also figure out, like, you know, do I like finance? Do I like venture capital? These sorts of things. My mom is, you know, very involved. She was an entrepreneur. She's very involved now in like the venture capital ecosystem. So her and I bounce a lot of ideas off of one another, which is like amazing. Like that's a fantastic resource. Obviously super, you know, low bar. If I feel like I can say really dumb things and she can just correct me, which like is very helpful. But I would say that those, like, seeking out those internships and like disparate experiences, as opposed to like just trying to like build your resume super tight to get into medical school. I think you just have a lot more time, you know, than people I think give it credit for. Yeah. Because, you know, like even if you think about like medical school or whatever, like, you know, you want to go in and then think about like what you want to specialize in, or, you know, so taking more time, I think, is never really a bad thing. You know, like everyone here is very young. I'm very young. I think, like, you know, we're seeing now like people are not retiring as early, and I think that just goes to show you how much more time you have to really find what you want to do and what you want to focus on, so that you're not just like working for the weekend, so to speak. You actually enjoy what you do and want to put, you know, your effort into what matters. Yeah.
You said that you found like your passion to be altruism, and like you're, you know, obviously seemingly to me and probably secure in what you're doing. Do you ever have doubts about where you're at and what your passion is, or what else you could be doing with that passion, and how do you like work through those doubts?
Yeah, all the time. I literally was talking to Dave Biancamano when we were at dinner before this, and I was saying that there are certain moments where I like feel like I'm pushing the rope up a hill. I think that those are happening less and less, I would say, than when I was at UMass, and like the years probably the year, like right after my concussion, and then into graduation, and then into moving to Toronto, like I had literal zero idea what I was doing. And those were like very scary times for me personally. And that was the time that I kind of spent searching to meet as many people as I possibly could to start to spur my own ideas, to spur my own creativity. I would say the way I deal with it now, I feel like I'm a little bit more regimented in how I handle things. I kind of check in with myself. Like, am I taking care of my mental health? Am I taking care of my physical health? Am I eating right? Am I over-caffeinated? That's like a huge thing for me. Absolutely adore coffee, but it kind of makes me go mental. And then I would say that I check myself with the group of 4 guys that I have, which I'm very grateful for, and my family and my business partner, Brad. But as of right now, with talking openly and honestly with Blue Deer, like we are talking about, what is our identity as a company. And so those are moments where sometimes I wish I worked for Amazon, because I would just, Amazon definitely knows their identity as a company. And it would just be a little easier to kind of show up to work. But I know that these are the things that drive me, and I try to embody that. And I think that balance of work and, the philanthropic or altruism endeavors, those drive perspective for my day-to-day. Is that helpful? Yeah. Yep.
You mentioned spending summers training, and I'm sure a lot of athletes in that position will spend most of their time training for their specific sport. Do you have any advice for young athletes whose dream it is to play professionally from your experience now?
Yeah, find your niche. I think this is like something I didn't double down on. I got advice at a very young age from a guy who played 20 years in the NHL. Why I, cast his advice away, I have absolutely no idea. But he said to me, double down on your strengths and don't worry so much about your weaknesses. And I focused a lot on becoming a very well-rounded player. I think that was a mistake. I don't know how well you guys know hockey, but Boston, obviously Patrice Bergeron. I mean, he made the Canadian Olympic team because he wins face-offs. Like, it's literally that simple. And, in the last minute of the game, who are they putting on the ice? They're putting him on the ice just to win the face-off. Like, that's his whole rule. And so I think identifying that early as an athlete, starting to understand what you're good at, and then doubling down on that, I think that's really, really pertinent for anyone trying to find their way. Because at the end of the day, like, there are so few well-rounded, amazing athletes. Like, that's like the 1% of the 1%. But I think that, in that, top decile, there's a lot of room to find your niche and kind of work your way in. Yeah.
You talked a lot about making connections, and just like I'm a senior, so like that's something I should be doing a lot now.
Yeah.
How do you get past that discomfort or like that uncertainty when you're talking to someone and in the back of your mind that like you're talking to them for your own personal gain, but you still want to have that like genuine connection?
Yeah.
How do you like get past that discomfort and like actually just like go out and talk to people, knowing that it's for you in a way, but also like making those connections?
Yeah, I touched on this, and I'm really happy you brought that back up, because I think that, like, for me personally, like if you and I were to connect and you were to ask me some pieces of advice, and then I was to, try and help you make some connections as an example, I just want to hear back from you that, like, things went well, or like that you appreciated that, or because there's only so much that you can personally do right now. But that doesn't mean that in the future you can't or won't be then giving back to some kid who's also in the same shoes. And I think that that's this, like, positive feedback loop that I think comes from networking and being super genuine. Like, you're not being malicious by asking somebody, like, hey, what do you think? Do you mind making an introduction for me? Like, maybe they say no, and like that's totally okay too, because then you at least have an answer. But if you never ever ask, then you're never ever going to know if they were going to totally help you, get a job, or get an internship, or make an introduction to somebody that you can go and do your master's under, or something like this. So I also think that, like, when you've got that feeling, that discomfort, that's probably the exact right time to ask. You know what I mean? Because that there's like a gap in the conversation, or you feel like you've had a good connection, and now you feel like there's a time to say something. And then when you don't, you also feel like now you're kind of backpedaling. So there are those moments that you kind of, like, this is the whole piece about like leading into that uncertainty, right? Like just kind of taking that step forward and knowing that the worst thing that happens is they say, no, I'm not going to make that connection for you, or, you know, no, I'm not going to hire you. But if you're really like sit like at 30,000 feet, like no one's going to say that to a fourth-year student. No one's going to be like, no, I'm not going to hire you. Like that's awful, you know. They're for sure going to like have a conversation about it and like, you know, start to try and help you. But great question. Yeah, I also don't like want to downplay that. It's like super difficult. I can like totally appreciate that. It's not like hey, like go and do that. It's like super hard to do. So I fully empathize. Yeah. Yeah. One of my best friends is a guy named Mike Halpney. He's the smartest guy going. And when we were 14 years old, carpooling to school, my dad asked him what he wanted to do, and he said he wanted to be an electrical engineer. And I was like so envious, like I couldn't spell engineering or electrical probably. I think knowing what he does and the ability for him to code like for software and then also work in hardware, I think that like that was really interesting to me about like the electrical engineering program. But again, like I said, like that's like hindsight 2020. If you put me in a first-year engineering program class today, I would be so lost. It's crazy. My girlfriend made this presentation, so it's like, yeah, that's like the extent of my knowledge. But yeah, I think that's where it would go. And then I think that now, you know, as I'm in the workforce and as I see earlier stage companies and as I see kind of like these guys who and girls and these founders really of their companies, there's always an inherent edge when somebody has a technical background, because, you know, if no one else will do the work, they can code, they can do the work. Whereas, and like we're in a very software focused world, right? I think that's the reality of the situation. Whereas for me, like I needed DJ to be my co-founder to work on a medical device startup, right? Like I could not have done that myself. Although like maybe it was my idea. You know, it wasn't. It was like obviously DJ and I working together, but I'm just saying like I couldn't actually go and fundamentally start. And so I feel sometimes at a disadvantage that way. So that's why that kind of comes up. Cool.
Sounds great.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. I'll leave this up just in case you guys want to send me an email or whatever. Like, feel free.
All right, cool. Thank you so much for coming to the event. Yeah.